Today we're taking a look at the paintings of Henri Harpignies. He was a little-known French painter, a friend of Emile Corot, but he painted trees and composed his paintings really well, and I think they're worth studying. Today we're going to be taking a look at the work of Henri Harpignies. He was born in 1819, 1916, so his life spanned quite a few art movements in France. His early career, the Barbizon painters were popular and made landscape more acceptable alongside figurative painting and historical painting. And then realism came along, which influenced him greatly. He was a friend of Corot's, and he pretty much stuck to the realist view of landscape painting. But the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists didn't seem to have much influence on his work. He's painted mostly in Italy, but also in France. He spoke about really loving to paint in Italy, and that's what he enjoyed or loved doing the most. But he started his career somewhat late, I think early 30s, late 20s. His father didn't support his idea of becoming a painter early on, so he went into business and floundered around there before his father finally decided to give him a little bit of money each month to pursue his art career. And again, he befriended Corot and learned a lot with Corot. You can see a lot of similarities with Corot and his work. Very value-oriented, limited palette, but a good sense of light. Not impressionistic by any means, but loose brushwork. Did a lot of painting outside. You can see the use of black in some of the shadows, but some color, temperature contrast, really good values, high value contrast, strong sense of light. And I don't know that was ever an important painter, never a big name, but I think his work is really, really good. There's a simplicity to it, and he really kind of puts you in the spot of where he's painting. It's a real nice sense of light and values. Here's a night scene. Always well composed. Drawing is always good, and really knew trees really well. Great job of painting buildings. Taking something that's complicated and making it readable. Easy to see what's going on in the landscape. Knew when to add detail or when to leave it out. It's a nice, clear, simple landscape that shows what's going on. And there's a lot of similarities with Impressionism as far as the subject matter goes. He just picks the everyday. Kind of rejected the realist view of painting, the peasants in the field all the time, and just kind of painted whatever was in front of him. Yeah, and spent a lot of time in Italy. Also did a lot of watercolors. A lot of his sketches were in watercolor, and they were also in brown and black ink, and I'll show some of those a little later, but could handle watercolor really well. Again, great composition and the ability to take a cluttered scene and eliminate what's not important and just let us see what's going on without ruining it with a lot of detail. Another one here, very dark. Again, limited palette, mostly earth colors. Don't know if cadmium's ever made it to his palette or not, but great composition, nice contrast of dark and light. So another watercolor, not a great big file, so it's hard, a little bit blurry or pixely. But again, you can see just the strong shadow pattern going on in the shadows. Nice color temperature to suggest the sunlight and shadow. I like that bit of blue in the background. It really shoves those trees back there. A nice warm and cool light and shadow contrast. Another night scene here, very dramatic. Probably a limited palette of just black and blue with a little bit of yellow and maybe a earth red, a burnt sienna of some kind. Very, very limited. because it's all about the value and showing the temperature contrast of the yellowy sun against the bluish sky. Again, really understood trees well, taking something more complicated and make it easier to read by focusing on just what the light is doing to objects, how the light hits the tree trunks, how the negative shape of the light sky against the dark masses of the foliage, designing those shapes. Another watercolor. Yeah, nice composition, a lot of nice depth in there. Yeah, not color oriented, more value oriented, which makes what limited color he has works really well because he sets up the values nicely. And again, can handle trees. Interesting on the foliage here, instead of doing every individual leaf, he's massing together these shapes of foliage into big shapes, designing the tree or those shapes to make it work as opposed to just seeing a bunch of individual leaves on a tree. Nice one here with the depth in the background, the variety of greens, nice composition following the path of the light orange or red as it wraps around and winds through the composition and leads you into the background. So another watercolor, again, kind of a backlit, the warm sky. I mean, there's a lot of blue in there, but there's an underlying warmth there that contrasts the darker, cooler shadows of the trees and the building. And nice understanding of trees. And again, it's a matter of designing these shapes of the trees that he's painting, as opposed to trying to be too literal in copying them. Another nice, clear, bright day. Again, not impressionistic. Brushwork is nice and loose. Great handling of the trees. More of a realist view of what he's seeing instead of impressionistic. Impressionistic being more spots of color, broken color, that your eye kind of blends together on the canvas. But great examples of how to paint a tree. Another nice one, nice depth, variation of greens in the foreground. Oops, getting away from me here. Nice clear sense of light. This was an interesting one. Looks like an unfinished canvas where you can see the bare canvas here is using a few lines to separate the bigger shapes of the landscape, and then he's just filling them in. It looks more muted at first, and then comes back and adds the stronger color later. So again, I don't know if this is outside or in the studio from one of his watercolors, but separating the big masses, and the big masses here are the value of the sky against the dark ground. So he's scrubbing in variations of muted green, dark, and kind of halftone. Then I would assume later he's coming back with the stronger greens in the flat areas that are lighter and making those a bit more saturated so they stand out. But he's seeing big shapes first, then he gradually breaks them down to small. You can see a little bit of the outline of suggesting where the big masses or planes are going to be separated, and then building up the lights thicker and lighter and probably a bit more saturated. So nice, you can see the stronger color towards the finish of the painting, that strong sense of backlighting with the sun right there. Everything is upright and dark compared to the light sky and the sunlight. So watercolor, a bit more involved, a lot of detail, still holds together well, but he's really detailed these buildings here. So a lot of drawing first with the, this probably studio as opposed to outside. But he did handle watercolor well, and again, trees handled really well. He's a good one to study for trees because he understood kind of the anatomy of a tree, trying to capture that gesture or the action of a tree or the shape of it, and then how to handle the foliage, simplifying it, still using some detail, individual leaves, but most of it is large masses. So a bit more of a finished watercolor as opposed to kind of a quick impression like his other watercolors are. Now we have a series of sketches here that I'm assuming maybe he would use these inside. I know he painted oil outside as well, but probably traveling, the watercolors were easier at times. And a simple watercolor sketch that you could do an oil painting from here. He also did sketches in just value. Reading up on some of these, they were more brown and black ink as opposed to just a monochromatic watercolor. And I don't know whether this is watercolor or ink, but he had nice angular tree trunks and branches. It always helps to paint trees more angular than just rounding off the trunks or the branches. So you can see he's got more angular feel here so that it's going up. And every time the tree trunk changes direction, he's doing more of an angular change instead of just rounding things off. I mean, you could just round things off like that, but it makes the tree trunk or the branch kind of soft looking, kind of like a spaghetti noodle. But if you use more angular lines to show the directional changes in the trunk and branches, it tends to look more solid, like you could hold up all the foliage on top up here. So approach the trees, even if it looks more rounded, get a lot of angular changes in the direction of the tree trunks and branches. So another one here, again, this is the black or brownish ink in the nice shapes of the trees. Good composition. In doing sketches, these are kind of his thumbnails, just doing value sketches. Quick as probably doing a thumbnail. Keeps these small enough. Same thing here, big masses of the shadow, the foliage on the tree, placement of figures. This sets up a composition for in the studio. I mean, it's a finished work in itself, but I'm sure the purpose of this for him was to bring it back to the studio and do it larger in oil. A nice composition, keeping things big and simple and massed together instead of too many little dots and dashes of light and dark value changes. So another one here, a good example of keeping big shapes pulled together. I mean, this sets up the whole composition. This shape here, broken up by the shape of the water. Then you got the dark shape of the trees, all one big mass. Then the light of the sky. So it's got about 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes there. That makes up the whole composition, and that makes it easier to read, easier to come up with color ideas, as opposed to trying to see 5 or 6 different trees or bushes right here, all different values. Pull things together, force them either into a dark or a light or a halftone. It just makes it easier to set up your painting. Then you can break it up in detail, but not too much. Another one here, nice simple design. There is some value changes within the darks here, but it still holds together as a large dark mass with the cross and the stairs and some tree trunks standing out against it. And using the negative sky holes to break up the trees and give them some shape. That way you don't have to paint individual trees, you're using the sky holes selectively to show some shape and variety of trees in that big dark mass. And the last one here, oil painting. In typical realist, kind of Barbizon school, limited palette, but high contrast, dark against light. You can see the effect of Corot in his work. So a good painter, Henri Harpignies, to look at for trees and composition. I think it was really good, worth looking at.